This is the Dolores River Canyon. Rivera followed this ridgetop, looked down on the canyon. We can assume we are walking in the footsteps of the Rivera Expedition along this knife blade ridge, with over 1,000 feet down to the Dolores River on the left and hundreds of feet down into a canyon on the right. There wasn't much else he could have done except walk along here. You wonder what was going through their minds as they saw that vast emptiness out ahead that they had to transit. Rivera descended this long ridge down into Disappointment Valley, turned to the right, went up the valley, crossed the ridge into Big Gypsum Valley. Looking off the Ketchump Trail, down below is the Bedrock Store and Paradox Valley, and the Dolores River. So they stood here and they looked at that direction, and their gaze turned to the south, to this side canyon. They must have thought, well, beats going down the river. This led them up into Saucer Basin and onto the Long Plateau. Rivera left the river at this point, came up this canyon, into Saucer Basin. And then up and out, probably over that little knob in the background. The question I will have to resolve today is, did they go to the left of the butte or the right of the butte? Looking down into the foreground, you can see these deep canyons. I would think they would have come up as close to the sandstone bluffs as they could to get around the canyons. The tool I'm using today is my new electric bicycle. No motorcycle, no horse, no truck this trip. The bike so far has worked well. I, being kind of old and decrepit, find having power to get up the hills pretty handy. We'll see if I'm still smiling at the end of the day. From this point, it is nearly impossible to tell for certain how Rivera and his men got up to that ridge. This country is very broken up and rocky. My best guesstimate is that they dropped into the canyon before me and went up the other side, bending to the right, around the sandstone buttress, avoiding that next canyon, and then up to the ridge. And this is all trailless country, about the extent of where I can get with a bicycle, unless I want to carry it. We're looking down at Saucer Basin from that butte in the earlier video. Rivera came up from the Dolores River. He had to have wound around on that benchland and then crossed a series of canyons and come up to this ridge line, following it south and coming up onto the butte. In the foreground is Paradox Valley. It's called Paradox Valley because the Dolores River runs sideways through it, or crosswise, rather than down it. Across the way is Davis Mesa. The Rivera Expedition came across that, past those sandstone bluffs, and picked a narrow trail now called the Ketchum-Up Trail. Steepest part is 42%. It's darn steep. Dropped down into Paradox Valley. Rivera Expedition paralleled the river. You can see the gooseneck below, and crossed Paradox Valley into a canyon sequence to the north of me, which they found they climbed out of the Dolores River Valley up through Saucer Basin. The only way through this butte to the north of us is along this bench. I think we can assume they came along this bench and then climbed to the ridge top here and headed south towards Long Park. After climbing up out of Saucer Basin along the ridge line, the Rivera Expedition dropped into Long Park. They must have been very pleased here. There was probably good grass. The stream probably flowed back in 1765. This would have been a great place for the horses to rest. Today, a good graded road follows the approximate route of Rivera through Long Park and on down to Highway 92. This is the north wall of Paradox Valley, nearly 1,000 feet high. Rivera had to work his way along the crest, heading east until he could find a way down, which turned out to be quite a ways.